All right, the meeting room will come to order. The secretary will take a silent roll. We have a quorum and are ready for work. First item of business committee is the approval of the minutes of February 9th. Has anyone had the opportunity to review those minutes? Representative Cannon.
I've read the minutes from February 9th and would move for their approval.
Thank you. The motion is to approve the minutes. Is there discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. The motion passes and the minutes are approved. As a second matter, preliminary matter, there's a lot of stuff on the OneDrive today for your review, including Attorney General Wasden's presentation. But first, I'd like to bring your attention to a letter addressed to Co-Chair Harkin, or Vice Chair Harkin, with regard to another subcommittee. I had said that if we had a second one, I'd use the half of the committee that wasn't on the first one. And you can see there, Representative Harkin will chair a landlord-tenant subcommittee for consideration of House Bills 45 and 152 with Representatives Kirby, Amador, Ehart, Scott, Erickson, McCrosty, and Nash. So we will make time for them accordingly. Since we're third item of business, and then I'll quickly move on. Our time frame on the agenda is until 4 o'clock, but naturally, since we have to adjourn in time to be on the floor by House rule, it will actually be much more compressed than that. So, without further ado, we'd like to welcome to the committee for the first time, Attorney General Lawrence Wasden. And Attorney General, I don't think the mic has been turned on.
Figure out how to do that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I'm not a technologist, so Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity. This is the first time I've been asked to personally be present before your committee, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. And so I appreciate it very much. I would also make note that my Chief Deputy Sherm Fury is joining us by Zoom, as is my Budget Director, Robin Lockett. I also have present with me Brian Kane, who many of you know, and Chris McCormick from the Internet Crimes Against Children Unit. And we at the appropriate point would stand for questions. But I've been asked by you, Mr. Chairman, to talk a little bit about our budget, and so I will do that. And to introduce that, I really felt like it was important for us to talk about what it is that I actually do, because there's a lot of misunderstanding, both in the press, in the public, and even among legislators about what the Office of the Attorney General is for. And by statute, I have the responsibility of representing state officials. And I am, in a certain sense, a captive lawyer. And that is that with regard to most state agencies, they are required to get their legal resources from me, and I'm required to give them those legal resources. However, there's another category of persons, and that is the governor, the legislature, and the judiciary. I am a captive lawyer, but they are not a captive client. They have the authority to select their counsel outside my office without asking me, and they're free to do that, and they do that regularly. Now, you may ask, do the courts get sued? And the answer is yes, and they regularly ask us to represent them. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. When I'm asked by those three entities, the legislature, the judiciary, or the governor, to represent them, I'm required to do so, and I readily do so. It's not a problem, and if they don't ask me, that's not a problem either. There are a number of small boards and commissions that they may ask me to provide them legal resources, and I can provide them legal resources. However, that depends upon the budgeting cycle. Sometimes they don't want me to provide them resources, and I don't, and then they get themselves into a legal jam, and they come running to me, and they want me to represent them. The problem is the appropriation power lies in the hands of the legislature, and they give me, number one, they give me FTPs, and number two, they give me dollars. And if it doesn't fit within that confines, it's very difficult for me to be able to provide them those legal services. So recognizing that that's the function, it's important to know the difference between policy and the law. And not everyone understands that. This body is the policy-making function of government. You get to choose policy A and policy B. If you choose policy A, then you are, by definition, rejecting policy B. And when you do that and you create a law, my job comes into effect with regard to that law. It's not the policy that I am defending, it's the law that you have written that I am defending. And so my job is to do two things. Number one is to give you legal advice. Now, it's important to recognize that I only do so upon your request. In the very same sense, I only represent the legislature upon their request. The law also says that I'm required to provide you a legal opinion upon your request. So I don't just go out and write legal opinions just for entertainment's sake. I do so when I'm asked by a member of the legislature or certain other officers that are named in the statute, and I am to answer questions regarding the law. And that is, what does the Constitution say? How does this interact with other statutes? Those are the kinds of questions that I entertain. It isn't, is this a good law or is this a bad law? That's a policy choice that you make. That's not a policy choice that I make. And a lot of folks get confused. One person said to me, well, you always tell me my bills are unconstitutional. You don't like me. And that's not really relevant to the issue. The issue is, does it fit within the confines of the Constitution or doesn't it? And so I say yes or no. And quite frankly, it doesn't matter whether I agree or disagree with what the statute says or what the Constitution says. I took an oath to uphold the Constitution. I took an oath to uphold the laws. And so it's what does that say that matters. It's not what I personally think. And so sometimes folks get confused believing that when I render an opinion, it's my personal view. And it's not my personal view. It may be, it may not be. But what I think personally is not relevant. In the very same sense that when I give you a piece of advice, it's not basically what you like or dislike either. It's what does the law say, and that is how I can, as the Attorney General, provide you the greatest service, is to tell you what those legal pitfalls are. You can then either maneuver around them or through them or however you choose to, but the best thing for me to do is to give you that kind of advice. There's three things that I think really need to be pointed out. One of them is something we call the rule of law. And the rule of law is that everybody is subject to the law. It doesn't matter who we are. It doesn't matter whether we agree or disagree. We're all subject to that law. Another thing that's very important to recognize is the principle of federalism. And people don't always understand what the principle of federalism means. Federalism is not only we separate sovereignty responsibilities among a federal government, a national government, but among state governments. And each of those state governments is independent from all the others. It's that entire concept, which is federalism. The other issue that I think is important is separation of powers. I think this is a term that you understand, but that it is one branch of government cannot exercise the power and authority of another branch of government. To do so violates the Constitution. It is a principle that has served us well for over 200 years in this nation. And what that means is that I need to be careful in making sure that I don't cross the line and attempt to do what you do here in the legislature. And by the very same token, it's important that you don't cross the line and try to undertake what I have a responsibility to do, because that's what's required by the Constitution. A few of you I have, and when any matter is before us, before me, there's two factors that really play a role. And that is, number one, what are the facts? Not the perceived facts, but what are the actual facts? And secondly, what is the law? And it's really a process of taking those facts and applying the law to those facts and coming with an outcome. Again, it doesn't matter whether I like it or dislike it. It doesn't matter whether I agree or disagree. What matters is, what are the facts? What is the law? That equals the outcome. I've used this analogy in a couple of instances, so if you've already heard it, I apologize, but I think it does illustrate the point. Let's suppose that you and I are driving down the road in a car. I look up, I see a red light. You turn to me, and you say, what color is the light? I have two answers I can give you. I can tell you the truth, and I can say the light is red. Or I can lie to you and I can tell you that the light is green. Here's the problem if I'm willing to lie to you and tell you the light is green. We'll make a decision that is ill-advised, and we're going to go into an intersection, and we're going to risk getting hit. The best thing I can do for you is tell you the truth, that the light is red. You can then make appropriate kinds of decisions that you weigh the risks, and you then can make a proper decision. So I'd like to turn for a moment then to my budget, which is what you asked me to talk about. And in fiscal year 2020, my office recovered just under $33 million. The legislature's appropriation for my office function was $26.4 million. That means for every dollar spent on my office budget, we returned $1.25 to Idaho citizens. And throughout the year, my office continued to add value to state government by offering expert legal counsel to state agencies and officers and to the legislature. My office's work over the last year reflected the two important functions of my office. First, to provide legal advice to clients before they make a decision, and second, to advocate on behalf of those clients after they make a decision. I recognize that my counsel is not always what some want to hear, but my guarantee has always been that the opinions, decisions, and defense of our laws will be straightforward and firmly grounded in the rule of law. Because my job is to call balls and strikes fairly and squarely, and that's exactly what I have tried very much to do. And I'm as committed to that principle now as I ever have been. Pursuant to statute, the Idaho Attorney General does not submit a performance evaluation to the Division of Financial Management. However, I would like to share with you some of the accomplishments of my office over the past year. Please let me take a moment to acknowledge the work of my deputies and staff as they have undertaken to advise our state officers in the COVID-19 response. In addition to the typical legal work that we perform every year, my office has been the primary legal advisor to state officers as they've dealt with this pandemic. I'm proud of the work my team has done under these unprecedented circumstances and the additional hours and effort it has required. All of the achievements I'm about to mention happened in spite of the difficult conditions caused by COVID-19, and they happened because of an incredibly talented and dedicated group of attorneys and staff. In 2020, the Consumer Protection Division obtained over $1.4 million in consumer restitution and received over $1.1 million in civil penalties, fees, and costs. This combined amount of over $2.5 million equals $2.62 for each taxpayer dollar appropriated for consumer operations in fiscal 2021. At the close of fiscal year 2020, more than $321,000 in unspent funds from the consumer protection account were transferred to the general fund. This is done pursuant to statute when at the end of the year, those monies are swept by the legislature into the general fund. This brought the total amount transferred to the general fund since 2000 to more than $45 million. In 2020, Idaho received more than $20 million from tobacco companies, stemming from the 1998 Tobacco Master Settlement Agreement, and we expect a similar payment this year. That will bring Idaho's total Master Settlement Agreement payments to over $500 million, all of which has been deposited into Idaho's Millennium Fund. But securing these payments requires significant legal work and a substantial amount of expenses as tobacco companies vigorously fight to reduce their payments. In fiscal year 2020, my office incurred just under $200,000 in tobacco litigation expenses, and that included the cost of general litigation and expert witnesses. The Consumer Protection Division also concluded 14 pending matters, including a $1.5 million settlement involving the three largest gasoline retailers in Idaho. After an extensive investigation, my office concluded that these businesses sold gasoline at an excessive or exorbitant price during an emergency, as prohibited by statute that you passed. My Consumer Protection Division continues to participate in two ongoing antitrust price-fixing cases involving over 20 generic drug manufacturers and over 130 generic drugs. We also filed antitrust cases against Google and Facebook. We are also actively litigating against America's largest opioid manufacturers and distributors, including Purdue Pharma, members of the Sackler family, and Johnson & Johnson to help Idaho and its citizens recover from the ongoing opioid crisis. And highlights from other divisions, attorneys assigned to the Department of Health and Welfare set a new record, recouping over $9 million in Medicaid estate recovery. This year, civil litigation attorneys successfully defended Idaho's initiative process before the United States Supreme Court. They worked closely with the Idaho Department of Correction to obtain a federal district court order and decision terminating a class action brought by inmates against the department 39 years ago. They also assisted the Department of Labor in clearing the backlog of unemployment claims that were created by the pandemic. Attorneys in the Natural Resources Division continue to protect Idaho's sovereignty against encroachment by the federal government under the Endangered Species Act. They prevailed in 2 recent cases, which will help ensure that Idaho is allowed to manage elk and grizzly bears. They continue to support the legislature and the governor in cases involving salmon and sage grouse to protect Idahoans from onerous federal mandates. The Fair Hearings Unit continues to conduct all administrative appeal hearings for the Department of Health and Welfare, and this work expands over 6 divisions and 40 programs. During fiscal year 2020, the Fair Hearings Unit received 628 new cases, conducted 376 hearings, and closed 625 cases. The unit provides the state with annual cost savings in excess of $250,000 annually over the prior use of private attorneys as hearing officers. Finally, I want to mention lump sum spending authority. This tool is critical for managing our budget, which consists of 88% personnel and just 12% for operations. When extenuating circumstances arise mid-year, rather than having to ask for a supplemental appropriation, lump sum authority provides immediate resources where they are needed most, and this ensures that my office is able to maintain appropriate level of service for our clients. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, that wraps up my initial comments. I would like to turn to Chris McCormick, who is the commander of our Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, and allow him to tell you what ICAC is up to. And then we will stand for questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. Mr. McCormick, welcome.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris McCormick. I do oversee the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force here in the state of Idaho, and I think most of us are familiar with ICAC or have heard that. Thank you. Have heard this or seen this on TV, but I just want to briefly go in what it is we do as well as what we've been able to accomplish throughout the state this past year. You know, our case origins, we're a little bit unique. We don't get 911 that comes into our office. The vast majority of the cases our office work comes from NCMEC referrals. NCMEC stands for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So what that is essentially a nationwide clearinghouse for all these types of offenses that revolve around children and technology. You know, we're a coalition of state, federal, and local resources that investigate and prosecute these types of crimes. So this goes into this national clearinghouse, then that is disseminated to each of the ICACs throughout the country. So for Idaho, we are the repository for all NCMEC referrals for the state of Idaho. That accounts for anywhere between 20 and 80 new cases per week. There's quite a bit that comes through our facility. We're also self-generating our cases just like anyone else. You know, we will go off of based off of tips from the community, off of proactive operations, as well as peer-to-peer operations. We also, it's not uncommon for us to identify additional victims going into investigation. You know, as an example, we may be investigating an enticement involving Sally, and we go through and we serve a search warrant on a device. We go through the suspect's devices, we talk to them, we interview them, and through that, it's not uncommon to determine that, well, not only is he offending on, you know, this little girl, but also Becky and Monique and several others. So it branches off more often than I think a lot of people appreciate. And then lastly, you know, we are a very niche area of law enforcement. And because of that, we're often asked to assist with both investigation and forensic assistance with agencies throughout the state. We will always assist others. We don't have the resources to inherit or to adopt these cases on our own, but we will always assist other agencies with this. And this can be everything as little as providing guidance on what we would recommend they would do, up to and including working from start to finish in tandem with that investigator to make sure that it's done properly. And we are a great resource, and because of that, a lot of people rely on us for our expertise. Metrics we've got, well, at least in front of me, I want to kind of clarify this to make the distinction. The Idaho ICAC task force is actually two parts. We've got the Idaho ICAC unit, which is 18 of us that work these types of cases full-time, day in, day out, throughout the weekends, throughout the nights. It's made up of 9 full-time Office Attorney General staff, such as myself, and it's complemented by another 9 full-time investigators are loaned to us from other agencies. So we have 18 of us that are dealing with cases throughout the state. So as a collective unit, we've opened nearly 1,500 cases this year. The vast majority have been cyber tips. We've conducted 36 search warrants, which have resulted in 47 arrests. A couple numbers to pay attention here. Presentations. You know, nipping something in the bud before it happens is very important to us. We try to get out there and visit the schools, try to visit the civic groups, the churches. Obviously, COVID shut that down for obvious reasons, and that's dropped off to about 27. But we've supplemented that or offset that by trying to put these resources available on our website. The last number is probably the most crucial. Pending cyber tips in the queue. We've got 18 of us. We travel from Bonners Ferry to Twin Falls to you name it. I mean, we're always constantly moving. As of 2 days ago, we have 797 cases in the queue. What that means is they have been triaged. We've determined there's a need. We just don't have the manpower to assign them to an investigator. Sorry, technical difficulties. Okay. Kind of small, but what this does is it represents the activity throughout the state. What we've got is around the Ada metro area, we're about 1,000 cases we worked in 2020. Up north, we've got another couple hundred we worked in Kootenai County. Worked another 70 or 80 on the eastern side of the state in Bannock, Bonneville area. You notice the badges. We've got 9 full-time affiliates. We've got one in Kootenai County, up in Coeur d'Alene. We've got Moscow PD. We've got Ada County. We've got Garden City Police, Caldwell Police, Boise Police, and Meridian Police. So these are complementing the 9 investigators we currently have that are assisting our office. And again, these are the ones working these day in and day out. Made the distinction between unit versus task force. The unit, as I said, conducts this as their prime function. That's complemented by the task force, which is essentially a couple investigators in this agency, some up north, some east. And what these are investigators that are a little bit more knowledgeable in these types of crime, but they don't work this day in and day out. So we're able to call on them. They work these types of cases in their respective jurisdictions. So if we get something up in Clearwater County, or we get something up in Bonners Ferry, we're able to call on these individuals and say, hey, we need some help with this. Or conversely, they're going to reach out to us and say, hey, you know, I've got this case. I need some assistance, and we'll send as many people as we can up there to help them. This slide right here is what makes it worthwhile. What our guys do and see day in and day out, these are images, these are sounds, these are things that nobody should have to see, but this is why we do it. You know, in Boise earlier this year, we served a search warrant on a suspected child porn case. Turns out that the individual was molesting or offending on children in the house. You know, a few months later, we did a multi-jurisdictional proactive operation in Caldwell. That resulted in 5 arrests of individuals traveling from as far away as Blackfoot to meet with what they thought to be a 12-year-old girl to have sex. And the last one is a priority 1 call out. And what that means is NACMEC, although we're not 911, we still are contacted 24/7. So these guys reached out to us. This is an in-progress call, rallied together. I believe the troops were out there for about 24 hours straight. And at the end of that, not only did they make the arrest, but they rescued 2 children that were being offended on in the house. So this is what brings this all together. And this is why I'm so proud of my troops. You know, where you hear about us, you see us, but I'm not sure you really know the effectiveness of what we do. It's very prevalent throughout there. The numbers I've given you is simply as a unit. Understand that a lot of these cases are going to be worked in the respective jurisdictions, and that isn't reflected here. So in closing, we do appreciate all the support we've received. You know, we've got a vast amount of support behind us. We also recognize that we couldn't have accomplished what we have without it. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Are there, Representative Hart?
Mr. Chairman, I won't belabor this because I know we have a long schedule, but I just have to say this. I was one of them who pushed for the extra ICAC help in Southeast Idaho and Idaho Falls, and it's disturbing to say that it's been put to good use. I cannot even imagine seeing the things you see on a daily basis, but thank goodness we have you, and thank you for what you and your team does. We appreciate it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Certainly. Representative Troy? Okay. See no further questions for you. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
coming. All right, a question for the Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Attorney General. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate so much all you do. I was curious about your comments about your fair hearings officers because I have struggled with that in my district. And my constituents sometimes don't understand that when they come before an agency and one of your DAGs is in the room, that it becomes really a courtroom. And sometimes they've come and not been prepared. And I've gotten a lot of frustrated calls from some of my constituents who feel like they've been treated unfairly. So I just was wondering, is there a better way to do this? It feels like there is a bit of a conflict of interest when there's a DAG that's assigned to an agency that has relationships within that agency and really understands the goals of that agency. And sometimes it appears that they are not willing to hear the other side of the story in a fair way. And that, I'm very troubled by this. I cannot say that strongly enough.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Representative Troy, the Fair Hearings Unit operates in a segregated way, and that is that they aren't part of that agency. They actually fall under our auspices, and then what they do is the agency has a right to be heard in front of that in front of that hearing, as well as the individual has a right to be heard in front of that hearing. And that's what they do. They're not part of the normal hierarchy that exists, and they're separate for that very reason, to provide a better way of having hearings. And as a consequence, they're neither for nor against either side. It's brought before them as a new matter. They do fall within the auspices of the Attorney General, but they are not agency dictated in that way. And that's the whole reason we do it, and that's the structure that the legislature has set up, and that's why we do it. Does that answer your question, Representative?
For a comment.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for a comment. And I appreciate that's how it's set up, is to be that way. And on the surface, it does appear to make sense. But on the flip side of that, we are also assuming then that the agency has provided our citizens with a clear understanding of what's going to happen, that they have treated that citizen fairly, have provided that citizens the opportunity to tell their side of the story. And I am not finding that always to be the case. And so I continue to be troubled by that, Mr. Chairman. I know we've talked about this in the past, and I do think we need to find a path forward that works better for some of our citizens. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you,
And thank you,
Representative
AG.
Thank you.
Scott. Representative Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. AG Watson, I was going to say Mr. Walston. This is maybe
Mr.
an
Chairman,
odd...
Representative Scott, could you speak up a little bit? I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Wasden, my question is, what led to the locking of the AG's office. I think that's happened since I've been here, and I get a lot of questions from constituents when they come here to visit the Capitol. What led to the lockdown of the AG's office?
I won't ask you to comment on that publicly, especially since I would imagine, without knowing, that there may be security protocols implied. If you want to speak generically you may, but I won't ask you to address that specifically.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Representative Scott, you and I can talk offline and I can explain to you, but I will tell you that there were security reasons that door was locked, and they were sufficient and they were significant security reasons.
Seeing no, Representative Scott.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Attorney General, with your current budget, I was wondering how you're doing with retention of attorneys and recruitment of attorneys.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chaney and Representative Skog. You and I have known each other a long time. It's nice to see you again, and congratulations on your election to this body. Our current budget, we are able to adequately satisfy our personnel needs. I will tell you that we are, in relationship to the private marketplace, we're way underpaid in terms of years of experience and responsibilities. We can go through that. I don't have those figures at my fingertips. Currently, we're able to retain our folks. There is always a bit of turnover, and I can give you more specifics probably on another occasion. So, thank you.
See no further questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate very much the opportunity again. This is a rare occasion that I've been asked to, or given the opportunity to present to a committee, and I thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right, committee, before we go further, I'd like, do you have everything? You have the card and stuff? No. Oh, so we're not ready yet? Yeah. All right, well, never mind about what we'll do. Before we go on, we will just go on. Senate Bill 1027, Representative Ehart.
Mr. Chairman.
Welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'm Representative Barbara Ehart from District 33. Mr. Chairman, committee, thank you for allowing us to present this bill today. I do have some comments. I'd like to reserve those, but in all fairness, I think that this should be started by the good gentleman who had been a member of our body last year, Senator Doug Ricks. He started this process. He's seen it through. And I would like to turn the time over to him and reserve a few comments for myself after him, if that's permissible.
Certainly.
Okay.
Senator, do you yield?
Thank you.
I do. Welcome back. We've spent many hours together in this room.
Thank you. For the record, Mr. Chairman, I'm Doug Ricks, Senator from District 34. I am pleased to be back here, and I did enjoy spending many hours, most of the time. Sometimes it went very long on some of our meetings, but I do enjoy coming back here to be part of this committee today and be able to present to you. In fact, if you'll indulge me as a kind of an honorary thing, I am wearing my representative badge underneath here, just to show some respect and appreciation, because I really do appreciate this committee and this body. And I still consider you friends. But I'm pleased to be back. As you know, the bill we had last year for wrongful conviction sailed through both bodies very easily, and then it was vetoed by the governor. And so we're bringing back a similar bill. There's not a lot of changes that were made to it, but there were a few. And we are hopeful that this will go through and that we'll make sure that this gets passed. We have worked with the governor's office over the summer and made a few adjustments of things that they suggested, and I'll discuss those here in a few minutes. But most of you have heard the presentation, and there are a few new members here, and I will try to be brief on this, but I do want to kind of frame it right here. When someone's sent to prison, we take away their most fundamental rights. We take away their freedom. And all of us can agree that when this happens to somebody that's truly innocent, then that's a big problem. That's one of the worst things we can do. In cases where that does happen, we can try to examine and try to figure out, well, what happened? Whose fault was it? Was it law enforcement? Was it the attorneys? Was it the jury? Was it the judge? How do you pinpoint this? And I know with this particular bill, and it has been brought up and asked for me for, well, maybe we should go after the one that probably is the most guilty here that caused this. And it's hard to do that. It's hard to really pinpoint because there's so many people involved. And so we come up with the idea that this just needs to be fixed and we need to try to provide some compensation. And that's what this bill does, and it's based on general funds. But prisons are punitive. They're designed to punish people, and in most cases, rightfully so. But when that happens to somebody that is in fact truly innocent, that's quite a tragedy, and we owe that person a debt. Our society does. Currently, there's no process in Idaho to compensate somebody who's been incarcerated, put in jail wrongfully, and forced to serve many years. And this bill provides an opportunity to try to remedy that and fix that. Wrongful convictions rob a person of their time, the opportunity to have a meaningful part of build a family, have a career, college. A lot of those things are taken away from somebody, depending on how many years they spend. Idaho is one of only 15 states that does not provide a method of compensating somebody who's been wrongfully incarcerated for a crime that they did not commit. Even when an innocent person is exonerated and let out of jail, there really is no services available for that person. In most cases, they're let off out of the prison, and somebody's usually there, and their attorney or somebody to pick them up, but there's no services. Even folks who have been incarcerated and for crimes they did commit, normally when they come out, there's a period of around 6 months where they start receiving reentry services. They get help with resumes, they get help with housing, even a little bit of money to try to transition back into society. But currently, there's not really a process for that for those that are let out because they were exonerated. They're literally dropped off on the side of the street, which is, again, another travesty. Under this bill, it would fix that. So if it ever happens again, those transitional services would be there. This bill also provides $62,000 per year for every year a person was wrongfully forced to be in jail, incarcerated, or $75,000 for somebody who was on death row. Additionally, it would provide $25,000 per year for $25,000 for each year wrongfully spent on parole on the sex offender registry. So to be eligible for this, of course, the person would have to meet the test. There's some very narrowly crafted guidelines and requirements. They would have to meet that. They would also have to present this back in the district court and let a judge just verify that all the test has been made and completed. There is a provision in here, so if somebody who is in this position brings a lawsuit to a local jurisdiction, there's an offset. If there is a civil award and the settlement paid to the exoneree, that you get essentially the higher of the two, essentially not able to double dip on the same amounts. So exonerees would have 2 years from the date of this bill it becomes law to apply for the compensation. We've identified that there's only potentially 6 people who have been released that would fit this, and more likely only 4 could qualify. This bill was drafted with the input from judges, prosecutors, defense attorneys, the advocacy community, and the Idaho court system. We've had a lot of input. So last year, the governor vetoed House Bill 384, and the main difference between the two, just briefly, is we had $60,000 in last year's bill per year, plus we had included some medical insurance for up to 8 years and some tuition waivers for college credits up to 120 credits. We've removed those on the request of the governor's office. They felt that that was an unfunded mandate, and we've upped the compensation by $2,000 more, so it's $62,000 a year for every year they were forced to be in jail. We've also changed it to a one lump sum payment. Last year's bill had it kind of timed out over a period of time, I think $89,000 a year. They didn't like the idea of doing an annuity type of a basis payment, so we're doing that in one lump payment. There is an emergency clause in this particular bill, so once it does become law and effective, it would go into effect, and anybody who fits this category could immediately file and go in the process to receive that compensation. But good committee members, this is a great bill. It's one I think all of us can get behind, and you know, we spend a lot of time talking about laws and trying to stop people that are doing harm to others, and that's a lot about what our laws and judiciary system is about. But we need to take responsibility when we get the wrong person and they are truly innocent, and take care of that, and that's what this bill does. So I do ask for your support in it. We've got some others who will testify, and I'll stand for any questions.
Representative Gannon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't realize there were other people to testify, but I would just make the motion to send this to the floor with a due pass. It's probably one of the best bills this legislature could pass.
All right, thank you. And thank you, Senator. I see no questions. We have...
Thank you.
Greg, and I'm sorry, Doctor, I think I struggled last year as well. Hampikian? He's here in person.
Thanks very much. I'm just here to answer any questions if anyone has them. Otherwise, I'll just turn my time over to Christopher Tapp. Are there any questions?
All right, thank you. And actually, I
Thank you,
recall
Mr.
receiving a notice that his online sign-up was to make way for Terry Shumway. So go ahead, and the one marked for him, let's bring Mr. Shumway up. Okay. All right. Mr. Tapp, welcome. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chairman Chaney. My name is Christopher Tapp. Hold on. I want to thank Senator Ricks and Representative Ehart for sponsoring this legislation, and all the members of the committee for considering this important bill today. Some of you heard testimony from me on this bill last year, and I thank you for your support. I sincerely hope that this bill passes again this year and is signed into law. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here again. When I heard this bill was vetoed, I was heartbroken. I thought of Charles Fain, another exonerated Iowan who is in his 70s and continues to work to support himself after losing 18 years on death row for a horrible crime he didn't commit. I hope he does not have to wait another year to try again. I ask you for your support for this bill. In 1998, I was found guilty of a rape and murder that I did not commit. I spent 20 years and 53 days in prison while the real perpetrator walked free. In 2017, I was released from prison, and 2 years later, in 2019, my innocence was finally confirmed by DNA evidence and the DNA donor admitting he acted alone in this horrible crime. I am so grateful for the tenacity of Carol Dodge, the mother of the woman who I was wrongfully convicted of raping and murdering, and the relentless efforts of the Idaho Innocence Project, Judges for Justice, my public defender, John Thomas, the Innocence Project, and countless others that helped me. Thanks to those like Carol and the Idaho Innocence Project who never gave up, I'm able to be here in front of you today and not sitting in a prison cell for a horrible crime that someone else committed. I cannot put into words the feeling of finally confirming my innocence after more than 2 decades in prison. Being in prison is as horrible as you can imagine, and being there when you are innocent is that much worse. I missed out on 20 years of my life. I wasn't able to spend my father's last years with him or go to his funeral when he passed. I was released from prison with nothing but my freedom. I had no financial resources, no way to rebuild my life or to meet my daily needs. I was released with no more than the clothes on my back, left completely relying on friends and family to help me while I tried to rebuild my life. Finding employment was challenging because even though DNA confirmed that I was innocent and the courts recognized this and vacated my conviction, I still had a felony conviction on my record that prevented me from getting most jobs. I lost 20 years of earnings for my future and was left labeled as a felony. A felony conviction making it hard to start making up for lost time. I am humbled to stand here before you today and be able to speak on behalf of all the wrongfully convicted innocent people. I am so grateful that you're considering this bill that would provide a way for exonerees to restart their lives once freed. I strongly support this bill so when an innocent person is exonerated in Idaho, they have financial help to start rebuilding their lives. I thank you for your time and urge you to pass this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your advocacy and your presence here. I see no lights, so
Thanks, Chairman.
thank you very much. I have John and Jolyn Thomas. No? Okay. Representative Ehart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, again, I'm representing Barbara Ehart, District 33, and I'll be brief. First, let me say that it's an honor to work with Senator Doug Ricks. This is a much-needed piece of legislation. You know, in March of 2017, I was on the Idaho Falls City Council, and I walked down to the courthouse as the proceedings were taking place with Mr. Tapp. And I sat there with many of his friends, family members, people who had gathered to see exactly if he would actually be set free that day, though many things had already been worked out. I believe I was the only elected official there, sitting, waiting to try to be supportive. Mr. Tapp has mentioned a few people that deserve much recognition. Carol Dodge has now become a dear friend of mine. For Carol Dodge to stand up when her daughter had been murdered and begin to listen and to look into what was really behind what happened with Mr. Tapp's conviction speaks volumes for somebody willing to step outside the hurt and pain that has come to both she and her family on behalf of someone else who has been wrongfully convicted. I'm so appreciative of her. And Chris had also mentioned John and Jolyn Thomas, who they are also friends of mine. I feel badly that they're not able to be here, but aside from Carol Dodge, the two people are probably singly most responsible for the fact that Chris is in this position today, notwithstanding everyone else afterwards, but it literally has been John and Jolyn Thomas, who both have sacrificed a ton, more than people will realize, to stand by Chris through all of this. And these people need to be recognized. You know, as we think about what has transpired, we cannot give Chris back 20 years of his life. We can't. I believe Chris would trade those 20 years rather than looking for the compensation that this legislation would bring. As a matter of fact, it's actually a false narrative to just talk of 20 years of his life, because it's actually 20 years of his life, or 25, you know, going back to when this happened, and then every year going forward, nothing will ever be the same for him because of that which he's been through. And so since we cannot give him that time back, we can only help or hope to do the right thing moving forward. And not just for Chris. I mentioned Chris because he's become the face of this legislation. But as he mentioned, Charles Fain and potentially others. When Lady Justice is blind, and as I think back to, I've said this before, but I think back to that which our founders had intended to do with our justice system. Our founders had intended that it was better for a guilty man to go free than an innocent man to go to prison. Unfortunately, in this particular case and a few others, Idaho has failed. It is time that Idaho make right that which we have done wrong. I do ask you for your green light, and I thank you for your time in hearing this. And to Mr. Tapp, he has been a model of forgiveness, a model of somebody who's willing to look forward with hope and to move on with his life and choose to be happy. And I don't think you can ask for more than that. Committee, thank you. And I'll join you again if that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
Give Representative Ehart an opportunity to return to her seat. I see no additional lights, committee. We do have a motion on the floor to send Senate Bill 1027 to the floor with a due pass recommendation, not to be confused with the much confused 1037 that almost got shanghaied today. I guess that the bill's not confused, I am. All right, seeing no commentary, all those in favor say aye. Roll call's been requested.
Representative Hartgen. Representative Kirby. Representative Amador. Representative Ehart. Representative Scott. Representative Marshall. Representative Troy. Representative Young. Representative Nate. Representative Cannon.
Aye.
Representative Erickson. Representative Skog. Representative Gannon. Representative McCrosty. Representative Ruckty. Representative Nash. And Chairman Chaney.
Aye. I believe the roll call shows an unanimous vote. The ayes have it, the motion carries, and the Senate bill will be sent to the floor. All right, committee. Where's the page? I guess we may have before I turn the gavel over, we may have a brief meeting on Friday, depending on if we get some slow to arrive RSs in and a letter from the speaker. And I was hoping to recognize the page since if we don't have a meeting Friday, this would be our last meeting. But hey, there he is. Yes, if you could come on up here. We'd just like to thank you for your time with the committee. I know that it's coming to a close this Friday, right? Yep. And would you like to say anything about your experience or what you were most surprised by or anything of that nature?
Yeah, so as my time comes to an end this week, I would like to thank every representative that I got to meet. I got to meet a lot of great representatives and realize that they're people too and that they're very down to earth. I came in with this misconception that they thought they were this big and they're the legislature, but they're actually really nice and really down to earth. So I want to thank every representative that got the chance to talk to me and had a great conversation with them. So thank you, guys.
Thank you. Committee will be at ease.